So programming resumes as normal. We've come now to the 5th week in Year C with the Gospel of Luke. It's chapter 5 and it's the miraculous catch of the fish, a wonderful gospel for you to pray, for all of us to pray through, meditate on. The first reading is from Jeremiah. I'm going to focus, however, on the second reading, which is this marvellous thing from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. In chapter 1 of that letter, he speaks about the mystery of Christ's cross, how it's a power and wisdom of God. Now we're in chapter 15, which speaks to us not about the death of Christ, but it speaks about the resurrection of Christ. Marvellous stuff. It's a really, really interesting piece. It's one of the earliest pieces of teaching we have. So in other words, if Paul or you or I were to meet somebody who'd never heard of God or never heard of Christ, this is the sort of message that you would give. And the message is that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he rose from the dead on the third day, again in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared first to Peter, Cephas, the 12, and then 500 of the brethren, some of whom Paul says are still alive, to confirm his message of truth, his bearing witness to the truth. It's a very fine letter, this letter to the Corinthians. It deals with many issues, but as I say, it's very helpful to understand that right at the beginning, he's dealing with the death of Christ, right at the beginning with the resurrection. So the letter, in a way, is bounded by the mystery of Christ's death and resurrection. So let's focus on that. Paul says, and a lot of the commentators have noticed this, Paul says something most important. We should remember, we should not forget this, that Paul really never wrote letters. He actually spoke them, and there was a scribe who wrote them down and then carried that particular letter, in inverted commas, to the community that he was addressing. So it's really the spoken word. Now, that particular scribe who heard Paul talk about the mystery of Christ's death and resurrection didn't miss the cue. He understood something very, very important about Paul's use of language. So when Paul speaks about the death of Christ, he uses the past tense. That is, the death of Christ is an historical event in the past. So Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures. When he speaks about the resurrection of Christ, he doesn't use the past tense. He uses what is called in the Greek language the perfect tense. And that tense is used when you want to talk about an event that has happened but is still happening now. So that's what Paul does when he speaks about the resurrection. So hence he goes on to speak about all these appearances. That's why he does that, to confirm the fact that Christ is actually alive. Christ is largely or mostly invisible, but when he wants to, he'll let himself become visible. That's the sense of the text. So this is great news for us. It means that Jesus of Nazareth, his whole life, particularly his death and resurrection, is accessible to us because he's alive right now. He's in Sydney here, as you can see, with the Sydney Harbour Bridge. He's in your bedroom, he's in your bathroom, he's everywhere. He's in your place of work, he's in your family. He's in places that we least expect him because he's risen. And Paul was most insistent, and he indicated this to us by using that particular Greek sense. It's a wonderful thing in our faith that Christ is with us all the time, in our ups and downs, our joys and our sorrows.